Back in 1986, Philadelphia's Jewish newspaper held the Jewish Comic of the Year contest. The winner was a chiropractor. A lawyer came in second. Please give a warm welcome to the third place winner, Rabbi Bob Alper.
Well, thank you very much. What a terrific audience. I'm looking out and I'm seeing all your wonderful faces. It's true what they say, that there are three stages in life: youth, adulthood, and you look wonderful. And it always feels so good to do live comedy. You know, we said a few years of Zoom. And during Zoom, we had no live comedy. I did a lot of Zoom programs. And if you've ever been participating in a Zoom program where there's humor, it's really tough. Because if the audience is muted, you tell a joke and you hear nothing. If you want to experience what it's like, face a wall and tell it a joke. For me, it was some theological research because I got to see what an after-death experience is like. But then we tried letting the audience be unmuted. And we thought maybe that would work because I'd get kind of the feedback. But Steve Martin has a line. He says, the enemy of comedy is distraction. And when you're building up to a joke, if there's a distraction, the joke just doesn't work. So I'd be telling something funny, doing something funny, halfway through, and you'd hear, Harry, would you get me a Diet Coke while you're in there, please? No, that was as bad as it gets, but no. Another time I'm doing the same thing, and I hear, who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? Yes, you are. What a good boy. So this whole thing about being a rabbi and a stand-up comic came together one moment. I was in Philadelphia changing planes on the way to a show in LA, and a woman walked over to me, did a double take. She said, "You're Rabbi Alper, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." She said, "You probably don't remember me," and I didn't. She said, "But I was a kid in your congregation here in Philadelphia during the 80s. And I used to watch the way you would teach and lead services and counsel and preach. And so I decided to become a rabbi anyway." I think the most exciting event of this entire comedy career took place, it was back in 1994. I was performing in Manchester, New Hampshire at the 6th annual Deli and Comedy Night of Temple Adat Yeshurun. And it was just before the presidential primaries. George and Barbara Bush were rumored to be coming to attend the show. Now, I had a manager at that time. She lived in Long Island. And the news organization was trying to find out, where's the president going to be? Where's he going to be? And she said she was sitting in her home when CNN called her. It was the morning of the show. She said, "I'm sitting there in my pajamas and my skunk slippers, eating my Cheerios, saying to CNN, I can neither confirm nor deny that the president will attend the Temple Adat Yeshurun 6th annual Deli and Comedy Night." But he did attend. And I was talking with him when Barbara walked over. She said, "George, do you want pastrami or corned beef?" He said, "Gee, I don't know." And it was at that moment that I became a presidential advisor. I said, "Sir, the pastrami is very tasty. You might want to try it on rye bread, hold the mayo." So, I was born in Providence, Rhode Island. I was part of a large dysfunctional extended family, not a close-knit group. Left Providence after high school. My parents also moved out of town at that time. I've been back maybe 5 or 6 times. I was there attending a high school reunion. I was walking around our old synagogue, kind of nostalgically. A woman was sitting there cutting cake, and I looked down at her. She looked up, she said, "Bobby?" And it turns out she was my first cousin whom I hadn't seen in 24 years. And in the course of the conversation, she said, "You know, I was in Barnes & Noble where I saw your book, and I almost bought it." It was wasn't easy growing up in the 50s. I mean, Israel was not secure. The Holocaust was a fresh wound. My parents couldn't buy houses in certain neighborhoods or join certain organizations. So you can imagine what a thrill it was one Saturday morning when something extraordinary happened. I was 8 years old. When Brown University had its home football games, they would parade from the campus down to the stadium right near my house. Came running, Mom, Dad, you're not going to believe it. Brown's playing a Jewish college. They said, what do you mean a Jewish? I said, it's a Jewish college. They got Jewish coaches, Jewish cheerleaders, a whole bunch of Jewish football players. They said, what's the name of the Jewish college? I said, Temple University. And I think I was always pretty funny. As a little kid, the word we used to use for our rear end was not fanny or butt. We called it a tutu, which might have been just our family word. But I can recall when I was very small, a babysitter came. She said, does anyone want to go to the park? One kid said, I want to go. And my sister said, I want to go too. And I can remember saying, I want to go too. Now, you may not think that's so hysterical, but I remember thinking in that very moment, I am one funny toddler. I was always pretty funny. I always used jokes and funny stories in my sermons from my congregations, which has given me now over 50 years' experience performing in front of a hostile audience. And I know what you're thinking. You've been watching me for a while, and people tell me this all the time. It could never really happen, but given the way I look and the way I sound, if ever Steve Martin and Alan Alda were to have a child, I was doing a show in London. A man came up after, he said, you know, you look so much like our former Prime Minister, John Major. I said, yes, and when I wear a dress, I look like Margaret Thatcher. And it reminds me of the fact there was another rabbi comedian, Jackie Mason. There are a few differences though between me and Jackie Mason. First of all, I've always been a practicing rabbi. He stopped quite early in his career. Second thing is the accent. You know, Jackie Mason, to me, Jackie Mason did not sound Jewish. In my view, an authentic Jewish accent is like my grandfather's, something he derived from that faraway land of his birth, Bangor, Maine. I can hear him now saying, well, Bobby, got to get you down to the synagogue. Yeah, start you studying for your bar mitzvah. I mean, to me, that's a Jewish accent. My grandfather loved to tell stories. He said he was up on the bridge of the Bar Harbor Ferry one time chatting with the captain when a very proper Boston matron joined the conversation. Suddenly a seagull flew over and made a dropping splat on the captain's lapel. Oh my goodness, said the matron, I'll run and get some toilet paper. And the captain replied, oh, don't you bother. By the time you get back, that bird will be half a mile from here. Because I'm third and fourth generation American born. I don't speak any Yiddish. I don't understand much Yiddish. I feel bad about that. I was doing a show in Baltimore one night when a man came over and said, Rabbi, your performance was geschmichte bezagele beschmechen bechachmaben. Which I think was a compliment. Because he had a broad smile and he used a lot of phlegm. I always did things a little bit differently. In a bar mitzvah, when I'd be conducting a bar mitzvah, you know, there's a certain point you say, and now we invite the bar mitzvah to ascend the pulpit for the reading of his portion. Once in a while I would say, Joshua Shapiro, come on down! And just before Yom Kippur, our Day of Atonement, I like to go around to family and friends and tell them, if there's anything during the past year I've said or done that has hurt you or offended you, I want you to know you're too sensitive. So I'm 78. Thank you. It's not that bad. I mean, my hero is Harrison Ford He turned 81 last summer. He was 81. Yeah. He's making another movie. It's going to be called Indiana Jones and the Enlarged Prostate. Well, they're going to test market that title. If that doesn't work, the backup one is Indiana Jones and the Reverse Mortgage. And he's got another project. Remember The Fugitive? The movie, not the TV, the movie The Fugitive? They're doing this in this latest episode. Dr. Richard Kimball flees assisted living. My wife and I have been married for 54 years. We met in 1964. I was home from college on vacation, and I was hanging out with a friend whose younger sister was hosting a slumber party for 6 girls with whom she just graduated high school. We crashed the party, of course, and for some reason they were all sitting on the floor of the kitchen. I looked down, I saw one really cute girl, I thought to myself, wow, you know, she's wearing pink baby doll pajamas. I thought, she would look great in clothes. When we got married in 1969, my wife didn't have the choices women have today. Today, women can take their husband's names, they can hyphenate their names, they can keep their maiden names. Whatever. Back then, my wife did the traditional thing. She took my name. Her name used to be Sherry Zink, and now it's Bob Zink. And our lives are totally in sync. For example, at the same time I got hearing aids, she stopped mumbling. Let me tell you a little about the background of that story, that joke. When the Pope came to America in 2015, a large Catholic relief group called the Pontifical Mission Societies of America decided, you know, the Pope has a great sense of humor. Let's hold a joke with the Pope contest. Jimmy Fallon announced it on The Tonight Show. He asked people to send in videos of them telling a joke they think the Pope would like. They had 4,000 entries, including Cardinal Doyle, Brooke Shields, Al Roker, Bill Murray, 4,000 entries from 47 countries. And that joke about the hearing aids, that won. I am the honorary comedic advisor to the Pope. Of course, if I ever met the Pope, I don't think I'd tell him that joke. Because look, English is his 4th language. I would tell him a joke that has simple words and repeating words. This is the joke I would tell the Pope if I ever met him. Hello? Hello, sweetheart, is your mommy home? Mommy's busy. Was Daddy there? Daddy's busy. Was anyone else home? The firemen. Oh, let me talk to one of the firemen. They're busy. Was anything else there? The policemen. All right, sweetie, put one of the policemen on the... They're busy. Well, what are they all doing? They're looking for me. So, this joke with the Pope contest, my winning, went all over the world. NPR, PBS, all kinds of newspapers, even a South African puppet news program on television had a segment on the rabbi who won the contest. I want to show it to you. This is from South African TV.
So, a rabbi walks into the Vatican.
We don't have time for jokes now, Justice. This is the news part. The part with actual news.
This is actual news. A rabbi has won a contest to be the Pope's official joke advisor.
You are kidding me.
It's true, but I will be kidding you soon if my advisor works well.
So, what exactly does the job entail?
Well, just suggesting jokes for my speeches. As you know, I talk a lot, and it's really boring sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yes, so I add jokes.
Sounds like an awesome job. Don't you think that maybe you should have a backup joke guy, you know, in case anything happens to your rabbi? It can be dangerous out there for a rabbi.
Are you passively aggressively threatening the Pope's rabbi?
How dare you suggest such a thing? I never would. But if he happened to fall off the Vatican balcony, maybe the Pope would like a joke understudy?
I don't know. Aren't you any good?
Need an ark? I know a guy. Get it? I know a guy. I know a guy, as in Noah. Noah's ark.
I have heard this one before.
Okay. How does Moses make his coffee? Come on, guys. How does Moses make his coffee?
How?
He brews it. You get it, as in Hebrews? Hebrews, the Jewish people.
I think I'm going to go with hoping the rabbi doesn't die. Although that other guy from your country is quite funny. That what's his name? Trevor. Do you know him? Noah? Get it? I'm so funny. I should sack the rabbi. Screw him. I can't do this alone.
So my wife's a psychotherapist, and we have a good relationship, an agreement. I don't criticize the way she does therapy, and she criticizes the way I do comedy. But she tells me things that happen. She was at a convention, and one of the presenters told about working with a couple around the issue of communication in their marriage. At a certain point, the therapist said to the wife, "Well, let me ask you, how do you express when you want to make love?" The one said, "Well, I say, sweetheart, I'm going upstairs now. I'm going to take a long, hot shower." Her husband said, "That's what you've been telling me? All these years I thought you meant I shouldn't run the dishwasher." Sherry had a colonoscopy. It's routine. We should all do it. And I was at the hospital in the waiting room. It was late afternoon. There's only one other man there. He was watching television. It was kind of blaring, and I was trying to read. A nurse walked in. She said, "Mr. Albert?" As well as it's Alper. She said, "Well, your wife is all set. Let me take you to her room." We got up there. She said, "Would you like me to see she's ready?" I said, "No, thank you. We've been married for 54 years. So I walked into the room, and there was Mrs. Albert. She was not ready. Not happy either. I had a medical procedure. I'm going to use terms that I don't think any other comedian has ever used in comedy. The terms are urethra and cystoscopy, right? My urologist wanted to check out my bladder. What he found was lovely. I mean, he posted photos of my bladder in his waiting room. It's really, really lovely. But to do that, what they do is they take a tube and they put the tube into your urethra and up into your bladder. And at the end of the tube, there's a light and a camera on a little tiny iPhone 12. So I was in the room waiting, and the anesthesiologist walked in with a very attractive young woman by his side. He said, "This is Dr. Richmond. She's a resident, and she'd like to observe the procedure." Well, I thought, great, it's not going to be humiliating enough. Let's just add this to it. Then I realized I'm going to be asleep, so what? So I said to her, "So what's your specialty?" She said, "Podiatry." The thing is, when I woke up, all of my toenails had been trimmed. So we have two children. We have an adorable 51-year-old, cutie patootie 47-year-old, both still in the gifted program. Both still on my Verizon plan. You know, the toughest time raising kids, I don't need to tell you, was when they were teenagers. But it turns out the Bible actually talks about kids that age. According to one of the commentaries, the reason Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac at the age of 12 and not 13, it's because at 13, it wouldn't have been a sacrifice. We follow Jewish tradition in our family. We named our son after my grandfather. We called him Grandpa. When he was in high school, he did an exchange with a French kid. Zach spent 3 weeks in Paris. Xavier spent 3 weeks with us. His last day, he took all his remaining money, about $250, and bought a black leather jacket with brass buckles and brass buttons all over the thing. Showed it to me with a huge grin and said, "My parents will eat this jacket." And when my daughter was a teenager, she had a boyfriend that really liked him. He was a nice kid. He was bright, kind, and polite. My wife and I always used to refer to him as her Christian suitor. And the reason we called him her Christian suitor is because his name was Christian Suitor. Can't make that up. We have little kids in our family. My nephew has 11-year-old twins. He's always saying to them, "Remember, one of you was unplanned." My neighbor has a 3-year-old. I called his house. She said, "My daddy took me to the animal zoo. My daddy's the best daddy in the world. I love my daddy." He on the phone. I said, "Carl, enjoy her while she's stupid." And my niece has a 4-year-old grandson. We were at a restaurant, and he had to go to the bathroom, so I took him. He went into the stall. I was over by the sink waiting, and apparently they had one of these electric toilets with the blinking red light. Because at a certain point I heard him say, "You know, Uncle Bob, these things take your picture." So we have a dog and a couple of cats. The dog is a recent acquisition because our old dog died. Yeah, and those of you who lost pets, no, it's not an easy thing. In fact, years ago, the show, remember Kids Say the Darndest Things, the original with Art Linkletter? A little kid had a sad expression. Linkletter said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Well, my dog died." Linkletter said, "Well, now your dog's in heaven." And the kid says, "What does God want with a dead dog?" Heard about a family where the dog killed the little boy's turtle. So they had a funeral in the backyard, and they're standing around this hole in the ground. Finally, no one was saying anything, and Michael, this little 8-year-old, was asked to speak. So he thought for a minute and finally said, "Baruch atah Adonai, turtle's gotta die." I told that story to a Catholic friend of mine. He told me when his little girl's goldfish died, the same thing. They had a funeral in the backyard with his 8-year-old kid officiating. She ended by saying, "Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and into the Holy Ghost." So, you know, I like to talk about my dog. It's therapeutic. He had an interesting history, especially when I'm in Florida. He came from Florida. He's a Florida dog. He was the victim of one of the hurricanes you have down here. And as happens, sometimes the houses are destroyed and they can't keep the dogs. Sometimes the dogs are simply blown away and never reunited. They took these dogs and they put them in kennels for a few months until they organized to the point where they're able to take the purebred dogs and send them across the country to kennel societies. Our dog, he was one of them, well, he was a mongrel. He came up by bus. greyhound. I have to say that. Gotta say it. So, I named him Gideon. Gideon. You know, I wanted to give him a good biblical name, and I was in a hotel room one night. That's the first time I've done this joke in a long time. Younger audience never get that joke. Older audience, they get it. Anyway, but he was Gideon. He was a great dog. It turns out he was a real southern dog, too, because dogs in our neighborhood, when they'd bark, you'd hear, woof, woof. And when Gideon would bark, you'd hear, woof, woof. So, after Giddy died, we waited about a year, and then we decided to adopt another dog. I mean, adopt, like, is there any other way? We had him naturally. No, you didn't. No. The only way you get the dog is you adopt another dog. So we got this guy. We learned a few things about him. First of all, he was born to a single mom. And he came from Puerto Rico. There's a terrible dog problem in Puerto Rico. I mean, they're all over the place. They're lovely dogs, but they throw them off bridges. It's awful. They found the litter, and they rescued the litter, and they weaned them, and they eventually sent them to the United States for fostering, and we got him when he was about 6 months old. Problem is, he arrived with the name Jesus. A Jewish family, dog named Jesus. So we decided to compromise, and we called him Zeus. Zeus. Then if we had to get his attention, we'd say, "Hey, Zeus!" You know. Turns out, dogs grow into their names. He was not a Zeus. He's a Barney. That's his name, Barney. His official name, the one that I registered with the American Mongrel Association, was Dr. Bernard K. Fine Dog. And it turns out Barney was Jewish. And we know that, well, let me show you how we know that.
This is our dog Barney. He's a pure Mongrelian. He's registered with the American Mongrel Association. He comes from Puerto Rico, and we found out soon after we received him that apparently he's Jewish because he observes Jewish dietary rules. For example, the opposite of kosher is treif, something that's not able to be eaten. So I'm going to offer him a treat, and that's treif. Good boy. But let me look more carefully. It's kosher. Good boy. And he's also respectful of other religions, for example, Islam. The word haram means something that's forbidden. So let's try another treat here. Okay. Now that's haram. Yeah, we wouldn't eat that. It's halal. And even Christianity. Here's a treat. And now, Barney, this is tasty. Yeah, we wouldn't eat that. But no, I'm sorry. It's bland. Thank you very much, Barney.
So one day Barney came down with kennel cough. And so I called the veterinarian. He said, look, give him these pills. You want to wrap them in cheese so he'll swallow them, which he did. And a couple of days he was fine. But apparently he really liked the taste of that cheese. Because even now, every once in a while, he'll walk over to us and go, And you know how they say dogs and their owners, they begin to look alike and act alike, a little reciprocity goes on between them? In our house, it's a little bit strange, but well, my dog gives me kisses, and my wife turns around 3 times before she sits. A friend of mine was telling me he had this dog with him when he went to IKEA, and it was summertime, very hot day. There's no way he was going to leave the dog in the car, but he noticed other people were taking dogs into the store. So he took him. A guard stopped him. He said, "Sir, is that a service animal?" He said, "Yes, it is." He said, "Describe his duties." He said, "Brown." We love dogs. Love dogs. One of the projects in our family is the Israel Guide Dog Center. I was part of it for a year. I actually officiated the wedding of the people who founded it. And they went on to found this. They produce 150 dogs a year, guide dogs, PTSD dogs, autistic child companion dogs. It's a wonderful place. And it turns out, if you donate a certain amount of money, you can name one of the dogs, which we did. I was visiting there. I saw the litter. They were really adorable. There was Mikey, Richard, Penny, Susan, and Rabbi Dr. Robert A. Alper. We have a couple of cats. One of the cats sleeps between our heads. And I noticed something that I pointed out to my wife with a great deal of pride. I said, Sherry, do you realize he sleeps with his face towards me and his tuchus towards you? He does that because he loves me. She said, no, he does that because he trusts me. His name is Bob Jr. My wife named him Bob Jr. So Bob Jr. does tricks. I know if you own cats are not known, they don't even do tricks, except Bob Jr. does. And I'm not making this up. I can hold him in my arms and say, Bob Jr., feign indifference. We live in Vermont. We moved up there in 1990. It was a realization of a long-time dream. And we absolutely adore living there. One of the first things I did when we moved there was join the AJCO. That's the Association of Jewish Chainsaw Owners. I also became a member of the local volunteer fire department. I had 6 hours of intensive training, which qualified me to do this. We built our house, and down at the bottom of our hill, there was a guy lived there who was not very friendly, and that upset me. I was walking by his house and I could see through the window, he was waving to me, so I waved back, and he waved again, and I waved back, and he waved again, and I waved back, and I looked a little more carefully. He was using his elliptical. There are a lot of stories that come out of our town and the towns nearby. One I love is about a little village where after World War II, city people began building vacation homes. And because they were there during the summertime, they decided to reopen a small church that had been closed up for decades. So they held services there, and then at some point they decided they'd really like to ring the bell to call people to prayer. But they didn't do it automatically. They were sensitive to the year-round people, the townspeople, so they called a meeting. That's how we make decisions in Vermont. And they made their proposal, and everyone was fine with the idea until the very end when the oldest woman in town stood up and spoke for the first time. She said, the last time that bell tolled was to announce the death of our beloved President Calvin Coolidge. To hear that sound once again would simply be too painful, so I'm against it. And then she sat down, and then she stood up and said, or maybe it was Harding. We're very proud of our state university. I found out at the University of Vermont, apparently Hebrew, Russian, and German are all located in the same building. It's called the Department of Semitic and Anti-Semitic Languages. And we actually have Jewish farmers in Vermont, Jewish farmers. They're pretty easy to spot. In the summer, they drive tractors with Florida license plates. So one of the nicest things about living in Vermont is that we get to ski on weekdays when things are uncrowded. But even if there are just very few people, if you're alone, as I often am when I ski during the week, you have to announce yourself. So I skied up one time, got to the lift, I said, single, single. And I heard a voice behind me say, ever wonder why? My training to become a rabbi took place at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, Cincinnati, Ohio campus. So you can probably understand why we never had any athletic teams. I mean, there's no way you could cheer for a team with a name like that. Can you imagine? Let's go! Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, Cincinnati, Ohio campus. Let's go! Imagine watching television late at night. That was the nose and out of sports. In the seminary league, it was the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, Cincinnati, Ohio campus 79, the Andover Newton Theological Seminary 76, and I see our time for sports is up now, the weather. At the seminary, I was able to squeeze a 5-year program into 6. Now, back in the late 60s, Israel was not part of the curriculum. So after 3 years, I went to Israel on my own, primarily to learn spoken Hebrew. It was kind of difficult, especially during the first week. I can still see the look on our cab driver's face when we pulled into our neighborhood. And I said to him in my Hebrew, "Behold, here I descend." And I had to call our landlord and explain that we were receiving bills for the previous tenant. I wanted to say to him, "Anachnu mekablim cheshbonot." We receive bills. He said, "Ma, what?" I said it again. He said, "Mazeh, what's that?" And I realized instead of saying "Anachnu mekablim," we receive, I was saying "Anachnu mechablim," which means we are terrorists. Back then we had payphones. I had to make a call from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. I dialed the number, I heard a voice say, "Please deposit 8 tokens." I said, "Gee, I only have 7. The voice said, "All right, I take 7. And I went to Israel a few years ago, and while I was there, the United Jewish Federation decided to treat me like a VIP. And they gave me a day tour to one place we went to was Dimona, which is a very impoverished town in Israel. And they wanted to show me some of the projects that my dollars go to help. They took me to an after-school enrichment program for kids out of poverty, 7 to 9-year-olds, I guess they were, where they gave them all kinds of snacks and food, enrichment projects. It was delightful. Now, my spoken Hebrew was really rusty at the time. I had brought books that I gave to the teachers in front of the kids, and she explained what sort of joke books and whatever. And I decided I can't really talk to the kids, but maybe I can entertain them. So there were 20 kids sitting around a table, and I decided, magic is a universal language. So I showed them a magic trick. I went like this. See, your response is kind of a response that I thought I'd get. But the response I got was 20 kids looking like... Later I found out that in Israel, this is the same as we do in America, where we don't use our index finger. Our distinguished guests from America, a rabbi, is giving us the fingers. By the way, in Israel, this is not good. This is fine. This is fine. And remember what this meant during the 60s? Peace, exactly. And during World War II, remember? Victory. Victory, of course. And during the time of the Roman Colosseum? 5 hot dogs, please. I went to a synagogue that was established by Jews who'd come from Iraq during the 50s. I wanted to see what their customs were. I didn't know the language or anything, but I sat next to a guy my age. When he sat, I sat. When he stood, I stood. Everything went very nicely until about halfway through the service. He stood, of course I stood, and people started laughing, giggling, and pointing. And he grabbed me by my shoulders and shoved me back down to my seat. And I found out later what had happened was there was a baby naming taking place. And the rabbi said, "Would the father of the child please vote?" My first congregation after ordination was in Buffalo, New York. I was doing a show in Bowie, Maryland, I remember. And I said Buffalo, and I heard a shriek from the back of the room. So I stopped and said, "Buffalo?" She said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Temple Beth Zion?" She said, "No, Christ the King." So I was the assistant rabbi in a 1,600 family congregation. During the first week, the older rabbi took me around to show me hospitals, where to park the car, how to make a visit. As we approached the room of one of our congregants, we could see from a distance that apparently he was feeling better because he was standing by the side of his bed using a portable urinal. We moved out of his line of sight and waited for him to finish. Now, as we stood in that hallway, I'll never forget the words of my senior rabbi, my mentor. He put his arm around my shoulder and said to me, "Oh God, when we get into this guy's room, he's gonna want to shake our hands." Sure enough, that's when I decided to become the hugging rabbi. I was there during the famous blizzard of 1977. It began snowing on a Friday morning. I drove downtown to the synagogue. It snowed all morning, all afternoon, all evening. That night I conducted Sabbath services for the custodian. Couldn't get out that night, couldn't get out the next morning. Finally, the next afternoon, I was able to slowly make my way home. It was during those 30 hours trapped in the synagogue that I learned the true meaning of the words, "And I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." My son was little. He was in kindergarten, and the teacher told me she invited the Jewish father of one of the other kids to come in and talk about holidays. At a certain point, he said, "Now, does anyone here know what Hanukkah is?" And exactly, he said, "Of course I know what Hanukkah is. My dad owns a temple." One of the most rewarding tasks I had there was work with people who chose Judaism, converts to Judaism. I love doing that. One man in particular, I remember, he came from a Catholic background, studied with me for a year, went on to become a leader of the Synagogue Men's Club. But at the time of the ceremony, he was excited, he was very nervous. When it ended, I took the Torah from his arms, placed it in the ark. I shook his hand, I said, "Congratulations and welcome." And he replied, "Thank you, Father." So I was at Beth Zion for 6 years, and it was time to leave, time to find a solo pulpit. I announced I was going to be going, and people were upset. One guy was particularly sad, and he told me so. I said, I really appreciate what you're feeling, but believe me, the next rabbi will do a better job than I did. He said, "I don't know, Bob. That's what they told us the last time." So I had some interviews. I interviewed a place called Corpus Christi, Texas, it's a lovely area, a resort community, lovely synagogue, nice people. I realized this was not the place for me when I was leaving, and the members of the selection committee stood in the airport yelling, "Baba, Rabbi!" These are not my people. So I submitted my name to what's called the Synagogue Placement Commission. And basically the way that works, I was sent from Buffalo to Philadelphia in a trade for 2 cantors, 1 bar mitzvah tutor, and a rookie moil. I was pretty excited about going to Philadelphia. During the first interview, you have to be kind of poker face. but I wanted to check out the predominantly Jewish neighborhoods. There's no problem. Back then, all you do to find Jewish neighborhoods, all you had to do then was look in the yellow pages under restaurants-Chinese, because Jews love Chinese food. And the reason's very simple. Well, all of the pork and shellfish is diced up beyond recognition. A woman confessed to me one time. She said, "Rabbi, I want you to know, we keep strictly kosher at home, but we do eat non-kosher food outside the house." I said, "That's perfectly all right, Mrs. Rosen. Your dishes will go to heaven." So I was offered the position. I accepted. The first call I made was to my mother-in-law. I said, "We are going to Congregation Beth Or." She said, "Or what?" Beth Or means house of light. They had, about 3 years before I arrived, they'd taken over an old manor house in the suburbs and adapted it to their needs. Unfortunately, because of architectural and financial limitations, it meant that instead of praying facing the east towards Jerusalem, we were all praying facing the south. And I had some theological issues with that until I realized at least we were all praying facing the land of our ancestors, Boca. We bought a house about 4 miles away from Congregation Beth Or, a Reformed synagogue. But right down the street from us was a conservative synagogue, Temple Sinai. During our first week, a letter arrived from Temple Sinai addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Robert Alper, inviting us to join them. I wrote back on plain stationery, "Thank you for your kind invitation, but we couldn't consider doing that," I said, "because my wife has informed me that she is passionately in love with the new rabbi at Beth Or." I always enjoy giving sermons. Most of my sermons last, I'd say, 16 to 18 minutes. If I have something particularly detailed to say, I don't mind looking out in the congregation and seeing someone going like this. What bothers me is to see somebody going like this. A woman came up to me one night, she said, "Rabbi, your sermon was absolutely superfluous." I said, "Well, thank you. Some of them will be published posthumously." She said, "Wonderful, I can't wait." I think it was the same woman another time. She said, "You know, Rabbi, each one of your sermons is better than the next." And when I first came to the congregation, during one of my first weeks after Sabbath services, at the reception, a man came over to me, shook my hand, he said, "Shabbat Shalom, may they have a peaceful Sabbath. Shabbat Shalom, your sermon was boring," and he walked away. Came over a second time, "Shabbat Shalom, your sermon was too long." Came over a third time, "Shabbat Shalom, you didn't prepare very well," and he was gone. Finally, I went over to the president, I said, "Excuse me, who was that gentleman standing out there by himself?" She said, "Don't pay any attention to him. He has some problems. He likes to walk around repeating everything he hears." And I think it must have been the teenagers did this. I walked into the men's room, and on the electric hand dryer that blows hot air, someone put a little yellow post-it reading, "Press here for a message from the rabbi." Always did tons of weddings, I did lots of them. The worst weddings have to be the outdoor summer events. I'm sure it doesn't happen down here in Florida, but in Philadelphia, people would select the location in the winter or spring and not anticipate how dreadful it is in Philadelphia in the middle of July. I had one wedding, it was 99 degrees out. Everyone stayed in the air-conditioned reception room to the very last moment. When it was time to begin, the ushers escorted all the elderly people out first. I think as a kind of a courtesy, so give them a little extra time in the heat and the humidity. The couple dragged themselves down the aisle. When they reached me, the bride looked at me imploringly. She said, "Rabbi, it's so hot. Could you please make it a quick ceremony?" I said, "Do you both want to be married?" They said yes. I said, "You are." Autumn wedding is a little bit better because the temperature is much more conducive. I had an autumn wedding where we were set up in front of a pond on a large estate. Everything went very nicely until about halfway through the ceremony. It seemed as if the entire goose population of Ottawa decided to swoop in for a pit stop in the pond bottom. So once they landed there, they discussed their journey with great enthusiasm. I had to stop everything and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, try to ignore the commotion behind me. It's just the pate warming up." Had a very nervous groom. I said to him, "Phil, would you please face Nancy and recite the vows?" He said, A-E-I-O. I was leaving a funeral home when a man came over to me. He said, "Rabbi, your eulogy for my aunt was wonderful. She would have loved it. To think what a shame. She missed it by just 2 days." And I was in my office when the phone rang. It was, "Rabbi, how long after my husband's funeral must I wait before I can start dating?" There was a knock at the door and said, "Just a minute." She said, "Thank you," and she hung up. And I know senior citizens are dating all the time. It's wonderful. It's as it should be. When I'm in certain areas like Florida, I love looking at some of the personals ads in the papers from seniors. Like one ad, it said, "Formerly 5'3", now a petite 4'11". These are the things I love. Taking really, really short walks on the beach. And soup. With this one, I'm 83 with a 2-year-old left hip. Still under warranty. And some of the younger people, the ads, one ad, striking, sophisticated, slender blonde, former model from the Midwest, looking to be charming, intelligent, fun-loving, self-sufficient gentleman, 50 to 65, for a mature relationship. Must have positive cash flow, a substantial amount of stocks and bonds, and have a terminal disease with no known heirs. And my all-time favorite, single Jewish woman seeks single Jewish man with dead mother. We used to do a lot of baby naming ceremonies. Those are very reaffirming. I love during Sabbath services. I would call the parents and the baby up onto the pulpit, and I would hold the baby, if it was dry. Usually ending with my saying something like, "We warmly and joyously welcome this child into our Jewish community, and we bestow upon her the Hebrew name Shoshana Malka Bat Leah David, and the English names Serendipity Glee Spiegelberger Millman." Of course, you know these same people are going to name their dog Shlomo. And by the way, Gentile people do something that Jewish people don't do. Gentile people use last names as first names. You'll hear of a kid named Wentworth Robinson or Fletcher Thornton. You never hear of a Jewish kid named Lifshitz Rosenberg. I was in the preschool just before Passover, and I was trying to explain to the children the difference between being a slave and being free. And when I finished, I said, now, how many of you are free? And they all raised their hands except one little boy in the front. I said, aren't you free? He said, no, I'm 4. I was walking around, I think it was maybe the 3rd grade, they were all writing creative prayers. One child wrote, "Dear God, please let there be world peace." Another child asked for an end to hunger. A 3rd child wrote, "Dear God, please send clothes for the girls in my daddy's magazines." Told this to a Presbyterian minister, a colleague of mine, a friend of mine. He said he was in his Sunday school, 4th, 5th grade, and he said to the children, now, who can tell us about the resurrection? And one kid said, if it lasts more than 4 hours, glory to God. So, I do a lot of traveling. Usually it's flying, but occasionally I have road trips. Last winter, I was taking a trip, some shows in New England, and the day before I was about to leave, the heater in my car broke. I called my mechanic. He said, well, if you get down here, I think I know what's wrong, I can probably fix it for you. But it was late afternoon, so I was in a hurry. It was freezing cold in the car, and I was wearing a fur hat that I picked up in Moscow, the fur hat with the ear flaps and the little strings that hang down. But I was by myself in my car, just threw it on my head. And I was in a hurry, and suddenly in the rearview mirror, flashing blue and red lights. When that happens, I do 3 things automatically. Pull over to the side of the road, find my registration, and place my clergy sign on the dashboard. Officer walked over to the car, looked at the clergy sign, looked at me in my hat, looked back at the clergy sign and said, what are you, a comedian? Years ago, my son was little. We were driving down the New York Thruway. I said, gee, we're almost in Poughkeepsie. He said, no, Dad, it's Poughkeepsie. I said, well, I know it's spelled, but it's pronounced Poughkeepsie. He said, no, Dad, it's Poughkeepsie. I said, we better resolve this. So we pulled off the turnpike, went into a local establishment. I said to the clerk, excuse me, could you very clearly and distinctly pronounce the name of this place? She said, of course. Taco Bell. I had a show down at Oklahoma State University. I was driving from Tulsa to Stillwater, and apparently it was Clergy Appreciation Week or month or something in Oklahoma, because by the side of the road were these little churches with big electronic billboards reading, "We love you, Pastor Rick," or "Pastor Ruth, #1 in our hearts." I was thinking, Jews would never do that. But if we did, it would say like, Rabbi Chuck has great potential. Or maybe we liked the old rabbi better. So when I fly, it's usually out of Albany. That's where I flew out a couple days ago, Albany Airport. It's about an hour and a half from our house, a mid-sized airport. But occasionally, if I'm lucky, I can fly out of Rutland, Vermont. It's a little tiny airport. It's only 25 minutes door to door, free parking. They have limited service. They have one 8-passenger plane goes in and out of Boston 3 times a day. I'm there often enough so that the TSA people, they know me. Last winter, one of the guys is going through my suitcase. He looked up, he said, Bob, it's pretty chilly out. You should have packed your gray V-neck sweater. And I was sitting there, and there was an announcement. Flight 62 is ready for departure. Will now be boarding Bob. I was the only passenger. Sat down, put on my seatbelt. The pilot turns around and says, so, where do you want to go? I was flying in I don't know where, U.S. Airways, long ago U.S. Airways. And you know the flight attendant stands at the door greeting you? Well, this time it was a young man wearing a yarmulke. Never saw that before. I introduced myself, told him who I was, had a little chat. I sat down. After the plane was airborne, he started walking around the cabin with a basket of potato chips and pretzels. Goes to each, snack, would you like a snack? How about a snack? Gets to me, says, nosh. And we were about to leave on another flight when the captain got on. He said, before we take off, I want to acknowledge we have some very special guests on board today. Robert and Susan Baxter are celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. They're sitting in seats 3B and 27D. One of the things I do a show called the Laugh in Peace Tour. Been doing this for over 20 years, where I do shows with Muslim Arab comedians. And it's absolutely wonderful. We do it all over the country, all over the world, England, Israel, France, and all over North America. I have a great time doing it. And one of the guys I used to work with, his name is Mo Ammer. Some of you may know him. He had 2 Netflix specials. He had a show on Netflix called Mo. He's a rising star. Unfortunately, I won't perform him again because he's really made it. But he's a good friend, he's a dear man. And something happened with Mo that I want to share with you. We were doing a show at Congregation Kol Ami in White Plains, New York. And as we were driving back to the hotel, Mo turned to me and said, Bob, I meant to ask you, what does Kol Ami mean? I said, well, it's Hebrew. It means voice of my people. He said, oh, because in Arabic it means eat my uncle. So you're a wonderful audience, delicious. I know when you see a comedian, you might hear some things that are funny. And I can never remember. I want to say, gosh, I listened to this guy, that guy, and he said this, and I can't remember. But sometimes you can remember jokes. So I like to sort of wind up my show by telling you some of my really favorite jokes. If you have pens, you're welcome to take notes now, so write down the punchline, because tomorrow when you see a friend, you say, gosh, he told this joke about... So feel free to do that, because everyone likes jokes. I want to share with you a few. First of all, I want to start with what we call the quintessential Jewish joke. Now, the definition of a quintessential Jewish joke is a joke that a Gentile person may or may not understand, and a Jewish person has already heard. Jewish guy had a daughter. She was the apple of his eye. What she wanted most when she graduated from college was to go to the University of Arizona and study Indian lore. Well, about this idea, she pardon the expression, I have to say, he had reservations. But he sent her down there, and what he was afraid of happened. During her senior year, she sent him an email. Dear Dad, I've met the most wonderful man. I'm going to marry him. He's a Native American. Well, he was crushed. He cut off the relationship. He no longer had a daughter. A few years later, another email. Dad, I miss you terribly. I want you to know we've had a child. We've given him a Jewish name. Well, his heart melted. He got on the next flight down to Tucson. There at the airport was his daughter, her handsome husband, beautiful little baby wrapped in a blanket. They hugged, they kissed, they wept. And finally she said, here he is, Pop, your new grandson, Whitefish. A Frenchman, a German, and a Jew are trudging through the desert. The Frenchman says, I'm so tired, I'm so thirsty, I must have wine. The German says, I'm so tired, I'm so thirsty, I must have beer. The Jewish guy says, I'm so tired, I'm so thirsty, I must have diabetes. In a little shtetl, a little small Jewish community, a very impoverished Jewish community years ago, the communal cow died. Well, the people got together. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? We need that cow. So they pooled all their money. They could come up with 300 rubles. They sent somebody off to Moscow to buy a cow. He came back with 300 rubles. The cheapest cow, 600 rubles. Oh my, what are we going to do? And then the committees met, and they thought, finally someone had the idea, maybe cows are less expensive in smaller cities. So this time they sent him off to Minsk, and he came back leading a cow. This cow gave milk in quantities no one could even imagine. Amazing. They thought, we need to breed her right away. So they brought a bull into the pasture. The cow went to the far end. The bull went to the far end. The cow went to the east side, the bull went to the cow went to the west side, the bull went, and nothing happened. 3 days of this, we have to get some advice. They went this time to the wisest person in the community, the town rabbi. And they told him what was going on. And he thought, and he thought, and he stroked his beard. He said, let me ask you a question. This cow, she's from Minsk, isn't she? Why, yes, Rabbi. How did you know? He said, my wife is from Minsk. A man calls his mother, Mom, I've got some exciting news for you. I've just become engaged. Sweetheart, since the day you were born, I've waited to hear those words. When can I meet her? Well, Mom, let's have lunch next Tuesday. Mother arrives and his son is sitting there with 3 young women. After they finish lunch, he dismisses them. When they're alone, she says, what's going on here? He said, Mom, it was an experiment. I wanted to see if you could tell which of these 3 young women I'm going to marry. She says, the redhead in the middle. He said, Mom, you're right. How did you know? She said, she's the one I didn't like. It's so much fun just telling jokes. Jackie the Joke Man Martling and Gilbert Godfrey, just jokes. I should do jokes. Another one is about a young couple. They decided they really would like to have an afternoon of pleasure, just a little bit of time. So they gave their 9-year-old son a popsicle, and they sent him out on the balcony of the apartment house and said, Sweetheart, we want you to stay on the balcony. Mom and I have something important to do, but you should report in every once in a while things you see and let us know so we'll know you're out there and everything. After about 10 minutes, Mommy, Daddy, somebody in the apartment house across the street is getting a huge television set. It's 2 men to carry this. I've never seen something. That's great, sweetie. That's wonderful. Okay, keep reporting. A little bit later, Mommy, Daddy, Tricia, my friend who lives in the building, she just got a new bicycle and she's got training wheels, but she's riding up and down the street. She's not going to need training wheels for long. She's really good. That's terrific, sweetie. Okay, keep on reporting. And about 10 minutes, Mommy, Daddy, Mr. and Mrs. Simpson are having sex. What? How did you know that? Oh, because Billy Simpson's on the balcony with a popsicle. Man calls 911. I think my wife broke her ankle. Could you send an ambulance? Of course, sir. Where do you live? 14 Eucalyptus Street. Can you spell that? He says, how about if I drag her to Oak Street? A couple was having serious problems in their marriage. They went to a therapist, and things were not going well during the session. The husband was glowering passive-aggressively. The wife was screaming and yelling. Finally, the therapist reached down, picked the woman up, and gave her a kiss on the lips for 25 seconds. Put her down in her chair. She was bleary-eyed. She was speechless. Turned to the husband. He said, now, that's what she needs, and she needs it twice a week. The husband says, I could have her here on Mondays and Thursdays. A rabbi, a cantor, and a synagogue president were on vacation in Borneo. They were captured by headhunters, and the leader of the group said, we're going to kill all 3 of you. That's how we make our living, but we're not unsophisticated. We'll give each of you one last wish. The rabbi, perspiring and trembling, said, I guess what I would like to do is deliver my Yom Kippur sermon one last time. And the cantor, also perspiring in front of me, said, as for me, I'd like to chant the Kol Nidre prayer one final time. And the synagogue president said, kill me first. Man went to a pet store looking for a parrot. He sees a parrot, it's $1,000. He says, how come that parrot's so expensive? The owner says, this is not just any ordinary parrot. This parrot can recite the Hebrew alphabet from Aleph to Tav without making a mistake. It's amazing. And what about the other parrot next to him for $2,000? This parrot, he can recite the 23rd Psalm in Hebrew from start to finish without a mistake. Amazing. And way back there, that parrot, $10,000? What about him? The owner says, I have no idea, but the other two parrots called him Rabbi. A woman wanted to get a parrot with a great vocabulary. So she saw in Craigslist an advertisement. She called up. She said, yeah, the parrot speaks tremendous vocabulary, but we have to warn you, we have to be honest, this parrot spent the last couple of years in a house of ill repute. And it's got a mouth on it like you won't believe. She said, I don't care, as long as it talks a lot. So she bought the parrot, had it delivered. She walked into her living room. The parrot looked at her and said, oh, are you the new madam? Are you the new madam? A few minutes later, her teenage daughters walk in. Oh, look, we got new girls, we got new girls. An hour later, her husband walks in. The parrot says, hi, Gary. A gorgeous woman walked into a doctor's office. I mean, makeup was perfect, her nails were dressed in Gucci, Versace, Prada, she was absolutely magnificent. She said to the receptionist, I've been stung by something, but I'm embarrassed to tell you where. The receptionist said, look, we observe patient confidentiality. You have nothing to fear on that level. She said, okay. She said, it was at Walmart. In springtime, a minister decided he really wanted to teach his 8-year-old daughter and 11-year-old son about the Jewish holiday of Passover. So after the lesson he gave them, they went off to bed. And when the minister went to bed, he passed by his daughter's room, and he saw she had put a sign on her door, Dear Angel of Death, the firstborn sleeps across the hall. A couple was celebrating their 65th birthday. They were born around the same time. And a genie appeared. Said, you've been lovely people. I'm going to grant each of you each one wish. The wife said, I've always dreamed of taking a round-the-world cruise. And poof, she had 2 tickets in her hand. The husband said, well, to be honest, as for me, I've always dreamed of having a wife 30 years younger than I am. And poof, he was 95. Thank you. Well, you are an exceptional crowd, and I have so much enjoyed being with all of you. And, people ask me, are you still a rabbi? Yeah. And I've come up, my understanding of what I do is as follows. There are all kinds of ways to be a rabbi. You can be a congregational rabbi. You can be Hillel, you can be a chaplain, you can be in academic life, organizational life. My rabbinate is making people laugh. That's all. It's making people laugh because it's something divine. And I think the whole idea of that was epitomized by words of my favorite author, Maya Angelou, who pointed out, she said, people forget what you say, and they forget what you do, but they never forget how you make them feel. So on this night, with a lot of terrible things happening in the world, a lot of problems in the world, I hope just for this hour and a half or so, I hope I've made you feel good, and I thank you for coming.